What if the Bible is more than a list of rules, more than commands telling you what to do and what not to do? For many people, that's exactly how the Bible is seen. But what if it's actually a single, powerful story, one that reveals who God really is? Not a distant God, not an unforgiving one, not a God who abandons, but a Father who relentlessly pursues humanity with love, purpose, and redemption. In this video, we're stepping back to see the Bible as one connected story from the very beginning, tracing how God intentionally builds a relationship with humanity over time. Not through control, but through design. Not through force, but through love. Because the Bible doesn't just tell us how to live. It shows us who God is, who we are, what went wrong, and how God has been working all along to restore what was broken. So, if you've ever wondered what the Bible is really about, you're about to see it in a whole new way. Did you know the world was created in a way that teaches purpose from the very start? Growing up, if you ever attended Sunday school, then you are probably familiar with the creation story. The story of how God created man, the land, animals, the sky, and everything else in existence in just 6 days. This story is found in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, and it opens the entire Bible. That alone is significant, because it shows us that before laws, before nations, before sin, the Bible begins with God creating. The earth, at this point, is described as formless and empty. Darkness had covered the surface of the deep waters, and the Spirit of God was moving over them. There was no structure, no order, no life. Then God comes into the picture. On the first day, God commanded, "Let there be light," and light came into existence. He separated light from darkness and called them day and night. On the second day, God created the sky to separate the waters below from the waters above, forming the atmosphere and structure of the heavens. On the third day, God gathered the waters together so dry land could appear. He then brought forth plants, trees, and vegetation so that they could grow, multiply, and sustain creation. On the fourth day, God created the sun, moon, and stars. The sun, the greater light, was made to rule the day, and the moon, the lesser light, was made to rule the night, along with the stars. These lights also served as markers for seasons, days, and time itself. On the fifth day, God filled the waters with living creatures and filled the sky with birds, blessing them to multiply. On the sixth day, God created land animals and then created man in his own image. This moment stands out because humanity is not just created. Humanity was designed to reflect God. God then gave man dominion over the earth and all living creatures, on land, in the water, and in the sky. Finally, on the seventh day, God rested. Not because he was tired, but because creation was complete. This day became a model for rest, later observed as the Sabbath, and it marked the completion of creation. The creation story introduces Adam as the first man to walk the earth. God formed Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed life into him. This act gave Adam both physical life and a spiritual connection with God. God then placed Adam in a special garden called Eden. Eden was not just a beautiful place, it was a place of responsibility, purpose, and relationship. It also had 4 rivers flowing through it, the rivers Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, all nourishing the land and sustaining life. Adam was given work to do in the garden. He named the animals and exercised authority over creation, establishing dominion while living in harmony with everything God had made. Eden was a representation of God's original intention for humanity. Humanity was to live in alignment with Him, steward creation responsibly, and to walk daily in relationship with their Creator. Within the garden were many trees, including two that are specifically mentioned, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God allowed Adam to eat freely from every tree except one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This command was not meant to restrict Adam's joy, but to establish trust and obedience within the relationship. As the story continues, God creates Eve from Adam's rib after declaring that it was not good for man to be alone. This shows that humanity was designed for relationships, not only with God and the animals, but also with one another. In the garden, Adam and Eve had a perfect relationship with God. They walked and talked with Him daily and freely. There was no shame, no fear, and no separation. Even in their nakedness, they felt no embarrassment. This shows complete innocence and trust, both with God and with each other. But the serpent, often identified as Satan, saw how aligned Adam and Eve were with God, and he sought to break man out of that alignment. As a means to do that, the serpent used deception. He began speaking to Eve, questioning what God had said, while planting seeds of doubt in her mind. The serpent suggested that God was withholding something good, and promised Eve that eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil would make her wise like God. Eventually, Eve ate the fruit and gave some to Adam, who also ate. This act was not just about sharing food, but it was a conscious decision to disobey God's instruction. This moment was what we now know as the fall. Immediately after eating the fruit, Adam and Eve's eyes were opened. For the first time, they realized they were naked, and they felt shame. They tried to cover themselves, showing a broken sense of innocence and trust. Instead of running toward God to seek forgiveness, they tried to hide from Him. When God confronted them, rather than taking responsibility, they shifted blame. Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent, with no one owning up for what had happened. This alone marked a major shift in human experience. It was the introduction of shame, fear, and broken relationships. In disappointment, God then pronounced judgment. God cursed the serpent and condemned it to always crawl on its belly, also cursing that it would always be in enmity with humanity. As for Eve, she would experience pain in childbirth and relational tension, while Adam's search for food while tilling the ground would now involve hardship and struggle. Most significantly, Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden. Though many consider this as the ultimate punishment, this was an act of mercy from God. God knew that if they actually ate from the tree of life, they would become immortal and live forever in their broken state. Then He stationed a cherubim with a flaming sword to guard the way back into the garden. This was a way of stopping Adam and Eve from wandering back into the garden, thereby separating them from their original place of purpose. When God created Adam and Eve, He intended for them to flourish, multiply, and live in harmony with Him and creation. But through their conscious disobedience, sin entered the human experience, bringing separation from God. At this point, one might expect God to abandon humanity, but the story does not end there. Instead, God continues to reveal Himself and His ways through chosen individuals. Some men we now refer to as the patriarchs of faith. And through these men, God establishes covenants, binding agreements initiated by God to define His relationship with humanity and begin the process of restoration. Did you know the first covenant in the Bible wasn't with Abraham? Though most people argue it was Abraham, that's not true. You see, after the fall, humanity continued to live in a broken world. Sin spread, and the world became increasingly corrupt. Yet God did not abandon His creation. In Genesis 9, verses 8 through 17, God establishes his first covenant with Noah. This is significant because it is the first time the word covenant appears in the Bible. God promises that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. To mark this promise, he sets the rainbow in the sky as a sign and a reminder to all humanity and every living creature that his mercy endures. This covenant was not limited to Noah alone. It extended to his descendants, which is all of humanity and all living creatures. It reassured the world that even after judgment, life would continue and God would maintain the order of creation. The Noahic covenant is considered unconditional because there was no requirement that humanity earn it or keep it for it to remain in effect. God bound himself to the promise, revealing his patience, mercy, and commitment to life. Moving forward in the book of Genesis 12, 15, and 17, God chooses another man known as Abraham, and he establishes a covenant with him. Through Abraham, God promises that he, Abraham, would become the father of many nations, and his descendants would inherit the earth. Also, that all nations of the earth would be blessed through him. In Abraham's covenant with God, the sign of this is circumcision. It serves as a visible reminder of the special relationship God has with Abraham and his descendants. The Abrahamic covenant is foundational because it introduces God's plan for redemption and blessing on a global scale. It is also partly conditional because it required faith and obedience from Abraham, and his descendants are called to live as God's chosen people. Most importantly, this covenant points forward to the coming of Jesus Christ, the seed promised to Abraham through whom all nations are ultimately blessed. In the book of Exodus 19 through 24, after the Israelites are delivered from Egypt, God establishes the Mosaic covenant through Moses. God gives the law, including the 10 Commandments, along with civil and ceremonial laws. This covenant is conditional because obedience brings blessing, while disobedience brings curses and consequences. The purpose of this covenant was to define the standards of righteous living for God's people, reveal human sinfulness, and point humanity toward the need for redemption. The Mosaic covenant serves as a tutor, guiding people until the fulfillment of God's ultimate plan through Christ. A quick question. For this covenant, why do you think blessings and curses were attached to obedience? In the book of Numbers 25, verses 10 through 13, God establishes a covenant with Aaron and his descendants. God promises that the priestly line, especially through Phinehas, would have a perpetual right to serve and receive priestly gifts. The purpose of this covenant is to maintain a permanent priesthood that mediates between a holy God and his people. It shows God's provision for worship and intercession, which is a reminder that even in a broken world, God provides access to himself through appointed leaders. In the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 7, verses 8 through 16, and Psalm 89, God makes a covenant with David. He promises that David's dynasty would endure forever and that his throne would be established eternally. This covenant points forward to Jesus Christ, the eternal King from David's lineage. It also demonstrates God's sovereignty and his plan for leadership and redemption in history. Finally, God establishes the new covenant in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34, Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 26 and 27, and is fulfilled in Jesus Christ, explained in Hebrews 8. This covenant brings full restoration. Sins are forgiven completely. God's laws are written on believers' hearts. The Holy Spirit dwells in believers, allowing personal and intimate fellowship with God. The new covenant is grace-based, not law-based. It transcends all previous covenants, fulfilling the promises made to Noah, Abraham, and David. It ensures eternal reconciliation and invites all humanity into a restored relationship with God. From creation to the fall of man, to God's covenants with humanity, the Bible tells one continuous story. At first, God created the world good, but humans broke trust with Him. Because of man's disobedience and broken trust, sin, shame, and separation from God, His original design and purpose entered the world, yet God chose not to abandon humanity. Instead, He worked through history to restore the broken relationship. God worked through Israel via laws, prophets, and wisdom, revealing justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Through Jesus entering human history, teaching humility and love, confronting evil, dying for sin, and rising again. This teaches us that the Bible is not just a book with a set of instructions. It is a living story, and it has a chain of events and teachings designed to shape character and as well give direction. Furthermore, the Bible shows us that humans cannot fix themselves. It shows us that love, not power or domination, is God's ultimate solution. In addition, the Bible reminds us of who God is, a God who doesn't abandon, a God who is not distant and unforgiving, but a Father who loves humanity far more deeply than most people realize. The Bible does not simply tell us what to do. It shows us who God is, who we are, what went wrong, and how God works patiently through history to restore what was broken. It reassures us that no matter our failures, God relentlessly seeks reconciliation and restoration, and that no sin is beyond seeking forgiveness from God. So, always remember, the Bible is more than a rule book. It is a story of a loving Father, patiently guiding humanity back to the life and the design and purpose for which we were created. When you read the Bible this way, it stops being abstract, confusing, or restrictive. Instead, it becomes a guide for life, a source of hope, and a constant reminder of God's unending love and plan for redemption. So, just in case you're still wondering, could the Bible's stories still guide people today as effectively as they did thousands of years ago? This video should answer that question.